The silenced majority in America's crazed abortion debate. The silenced majority in America's crazed abortion debate. Abortion is tragic in the strict sense of the term. It's an act that in a country where laws reflected this tragic reality, abortion would be safe and legally available early on in pregnancy, while freely available birth control and generous support for pregnant women would contribute to making it as rare as possible. Restrictions on such an arrangement would build on that the fetus is a matter of relative moral indifference early in pregnancy but develops into a being possessing full dignity and rights by the time of birth. For many people, that the United States is moving away from policies that reflect these intuitions is a tragedy, too, though this time in the less precise, colloquial sense of word it is a terrible misfortune. Our abortion crack, the center of gravity in very much reflects the moral messiness of reality. According to Gallup, instead of public policy reflecting the rightly conflicted majority view as it tends to do, for example, in much of Europe we have a misshapen, increasingly grotesque situation in which only the extremes prevail. In Republican-controlled states, most in the South and Midwest, severely restricting abortion and sometimes banning it outright, with few, if any, exceptions for the life and health of the mother. They're doing so in the meanwhile, facing a pro-life movement emboldened by the Trump administration's efforts to advance its cause. Other states including Virginia, New York, Vermont, and Rhode Island have laws that bolster or expand abortion rights. Those efforts, even if the Supreme Court fails to fulfill the most fervent hopes of the pro-life movement by fully and explicitly overturning Roe and Casey, it is quite likely to permit greater state restrictions on abortion than we've seen since the 1970s. The result will be in one America, the laws will recognize and protect the rights of the fetus alone. In the other, as the nation learned in the 1860s, intractable divisions on matters of life, death, and personal freedom can be civically poisonous and ultimately incompatible with a minimum of national cohesion and peace. But, at least on abortion, the U.S. faces a different kind of tension and conflict today. Each extreme look, the convictions and preferences of tens of millions of conflicted women and men is likely to have little influence over the shape of abortion law in the coming years. In America, stop the Iran war before it starts. What I got wrong about Trump and the culture war. Trump is America's biggest loser. But will anyone care? Bernie Sanders' proposal to halt funding for charter schools draws mixed reactions. 5 scathing cartoons about Alabama's abortion ban. Why white supremacist terrorism is surging.
Raindrop, drop top smoking, no cooking the hot bar. Fucking on your bitch, yeah, that. Looking up, open the park.